Just music. Okay. I'll be sensible now. Continue.
Right. I'm not going to be sensible. Hello, everyone.
Hey. Hi.
That's so cute.
Okay. Thank you. Right. So here we are, folks. Shireen, Rekha, and Namika are all in Bahrain. Usha, you're in Bahrain as well. Yes. Where is Salim? Is that Sri Lanka?
That's yeah.
Sri Lanka and who else have I forgotten? Nilika, where is she? She's in Australia.
She's in Melbourne. Nilika is in Melbourne, but she's just had the jab. She has just had the jab.
Yes.
So she's in bed, but she's listening in.
Yeah. Okay. And you are where?
I am in Sri Lanka.
You're in Sri Lanka as well. Okay, so we're international.
Yes. And there's another lady from Sri Lanka just joining in, but she doesn't want to put her video on.
That's okay. So that's fine.
She'll be joining in. Sure.
That's all right. Okay, so I won't waste too much. Is that your daughter, Anamika? That's your daughter, Anamika. Always your daughter.
She's fine.
Okay.
I'm just sitting scared because when she will come, there is no.
Okay, turn the volume off then. Right. Okay.
Excuse me, Sarah. We have Sudha from Bangalore, India.
Oh yes, Bangalore. Hi. So we're Indian, in Sri Lanka, UK. I thought Maria might be coming in from Canada, but maybe not.
I did ask her, but she hasn't replied.
Oh, okay. Right. So we are
from Jamaica hasn't joined us yet.
Yeah. Right. Anyway, so let's get going. I have a crib sheet here. So I'll just put it there. So I'll pretend like I know what I'm saying. Okay. Right. So Emma is a lovely lady. She's fabulous. I've known her, I think, since 2006, 2008, when I first joined International Read to Me Day. She is the founder and creative director of Boogie Books. And just from the name Boogie Books, you can tell what kind of person she is, okay? She's my kind of person. Boogie Books is a fabulous name for a publishing company. She is creator of and the driver of the Child Rights Program, which I'm sure she'll be telling us all about as well. She's an award-winning author. She is the mastermind behind the International Read to Me Day initiative, which I am an ambassador for in Bahrain. And most importantly, I think she is a dedicated children's literacy advocate, which is why she does all of this stuff. And this all started, which is really quite funny, I think this is brilliant, because she was fired by her husband. And she started painting, and then she started writing, and then she thought, well, I want to get this published, so I'll start my own publishing company. Okay, to self-publish herself, right? So this lady is a mover and shaker in the publishing industry, and Boogie Books is now the world's leading publisher of books written by children, I believe. But Emma can confirm all this. So without further ado, Emma is going to tell us all about all the work that she does. Fabulous. Go for it, Emma. I'll turn my volume. Now, one second, actually. If you do have any questions, can you write them on the chat and then I'll ask, and that way we won't interrupt. And then at the end, we can have chance for question and answers. Okay? Cool. Mute.
Okay, well, thank you, Sarah. It's actually payback after me making you do all the videos for International Read to Me Day. So everyone, thank you so much for having me in your homes this afternoon, I believe, for most of you. And Sarah, I think it's early in the morning for you in the UK. 1 o'clock in the morning, 1 o'clock in the morning, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Oh, that's okay. So it is incredibly delightful. And I think that this is actually what I love about what I do, is that I get to meet people like Sarah. We turn ourselves inside out in support of each other's endeavors. And I think that when women particularly support each other, that we are capable of changing the world. So that is very exciting. So thank you again for having me all with you. The introduction that Sarah did was very, very graceful, and I was fired by my husband. I was running the front desk at a manufacturing business that we had at the time, and every time he went past, he was on his way to the boardroom to get another chocolate biscuit, and I think he was a little bit stressed, and I kept commenting on that he possibly didn't need to do that, and he asked me to stay at home the next day. But we did keep working together. But he was very gracious because I had a nanny who was helping me with our 3 very small children at the time. And he wanted to take an each way bet on it. And he said, look, can you just go home, but only for a month? Because if this new person doesn't work out, then I need you back again. So it was actually a really preposterous time. And I did a painting, and actually I can show you. Can I show you? I can show you. Let me see if I can do it. So this is can you see on the wall here? This one, can you see? Still can't see. Hang on, I'll do that. Can you see the picture there? Not really, just a little bit. It's just in a really fine ink. So I did that of David with his 3 girls and had a lovely time. But of course it's huge. So I couldn't take it in and out of the car, and I couldn't go anywhere. And I was staying at home, and all I could hear was the nanny having a lovely time with my children while I was pretending to work. So I had to be a bit more constructive than that. So Annabelle was only tiny, she's our second daughter, was going to school, and she was really worried about being too little. And she was only small in stature, but she was worried about physically getting lost at school. So we had this problem that we needed to solve, and it didn't matter what I said to her during the day, she still didn't quite take on board what I had done. Anyway, so we took some photos, I wrote some words down and sat the 2 little ones down and actually read it as though it was a story, but the messaging was there. And they loved it. They were completely entranced by the process. And it was really lovely. I then used the opportunity to actually do the drawings, finesse the words, take it to a graphic designer, and just worked its way up, as Sarah said. Now, the first book, I'll just get it, was really not, oh no, now I can't find it. I won't worry, sorry. I was going to show you because it was nearly laughable. It was so daggy in its concept. The cover design was poor. The illustrations were actually drawings, not illustrations. The whole process was a little bit of a shambles with a graphic designer who made it amazing. And even though I look at that book, I'm so proud of it because it was my first one, and it started this whole process, and it started everything that I then learned about it. And each book got better and better, and each time I would explain it, it would get better and better. And my understanding of the power of story got better and better. So really, I'm self-taught, and so that's been for the last 15 years. And in that time, a really good girlfriend of mine asked me to be a literacy advocate at school, and it was a really lovely thing that you do in a small community, as I can imagine you would be doing with your friends when you're so proud of what they've done. And they asked me to school. I was really nervous. I made my first speech, and I asked the school if I could do a workshop with the children and just tell them the same thing that I'd told in the speech. And I have to admit that as much as it was lovely to talk to the adults about it, the way that the children responded to story, to how a story was being created, they had such an incredible, intense interest in everything about it. And they asked questions for ages and ages. And we kept doing another, then I would go back and do another workshop. And it literally grew from that point on. And now it's actually a textbook and an online course, and it's actually a written program. And over, I think it's 400 children now have actually written and illustrated their own children's picture books, which is what Sarah was alluding to. Boogie Books is the largest publisher on Amazon of children's books by children. So everything has grown from that tiny, tiny little moment, that first book that I was too impatient to wait for. And I think that, as I said, the key turning point, or not key turning point, the key moment for me for realizing that what I wanted to do was actually demystify the process with children, to actually show them that literature then was accessible to them, and to give them an opportunity to create the books, or create books and products that they actually liked consuming themselves. And when I would see the children at their first book launch, and we've done it for years now, like I think we've done about 14 book launches. When you see the children standing there, these are not children that would have possibly a podium finish because they were athletes, or they're not singers in a choir, or they might not be children who even their peers even know. But deep down inside, they're storytellers, and they are empowered by the process of creating a book. And I've also had a chance to see their peers increase their interest in literacy and so on. Right, so that's how I got to where I am now. And my favorite thing that I'm doing at the moment is actually working with groups of children. And instead of each child creating one book, I possibly can work with hundreds of children as they all contribute to create a single title. And the latest one we've done is, sorry, I did have it prepared earlier, but this is Akila's necklace. And there is a little school here in Toowoomba, which has the most ethnically diverse primary school in Queensland, which is my state where I live, with 41 different languages spoken in the school. And the children, this gave them an opportunity to see children that looked just like them in the stories. And that is another layer of empowerment for children. And this was a story about the refugee experience and about finding home, and we built it around a quest. So how do I sit here in front of you and actually share something that I've learned, when we arrive at this point? And I was thinking about that, about what on earth I could actually share with you. And we start in the workshops. And have you all got a piece of pen and paper anywhere with you? Like, I know that you can't quite do a thumbs up, but would you be game to actually just do a little exercise that I do with the children to get them all warmed up and, like thinking about the stories?
Absolutely. Let me just go and get a piece of paper myself. Just a second.
Okay, I'm just using my notebook, and this is going to be very clumsy because it's going to be very hard. I haven't tried to ever do this on Zoom, so thank you for experimenting a little bit with me. So as soon as Sarah gets back. So this is going to be very, 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 very silly. Okay. So there's nothing, we're not going to try and do a drawing or anything like that. Okay. So we start every workshop, and I will, I promise you I'll be very grown up and methodical, and we'll talk about the chemistry of telling stories and, the story arcs and all of that kind of stuff. But whenever I'm sitting with the children, I actually get them to start with a breathing exercise, and we just take a couple of big deep breaths, and we talk about how you can actually detach yourself from what happened 10 minutes ago to do that. And then we do a drawing exercise, and the kids can't quite believe that I'm talking about stories when we then do a drawing to then lead into stories. So I want you to have a go at this. Okay, so this is a blind contour drawing. Contour meaning the outside or the lines that represent something. So if we think about anything that we ever draw, it's actually about learning how to see, because everything we draw is one line meets another line. It forms a shape. The shape sits somewhere. Then there's some depth, and then it's where it is. It's the gestalt. It's the everything. And what's so lovely about actually teaching them how to see is that it seems to just switch on their ability to actually describe what is happening around them, because they switch out of their heads and into actually what is going on. So I talk about it as taking yourself from the observer to the author's perspective. Okay, so I'll just try a demonstration. This could go horribly wrong, but it could go horribly right. So I've got 2 contrasting pens just so I can see what I'm doing. But what I get the children to do is sometimes I can be working with 300 or 400 children in a stadium. Like, it can be pretty crazy. But I get them to start with a piece of paper, okay? And I'm just trying to work out how I can do this without. How can I do this? Okay. What I say that we're going to do is that they're not allowed to look at the piece of paper, but they're allowed to. But they have to look at their hand. Okay. So I'm going to try this. And so you start in the piece in the middle, you set yourself up and you turn your head away from the paper. Okay. And normally you don't talk, but that's my thumbnail. And I'm going to go down. That's the inside. That's my little finger. I think I'm doing this upside down. That's my ring finger. I'm up to the middle and then my pointer. I'm already lost, which is quite good. Anyway, so there we go. Now that is absolutely ridiculous. And what is so beautiful about that, and we do concentrate for a little bit longer, I promise you, when we're in the classroom. And I'm going to get you to try and do that. But the reason I'm showing you this is that when we do that, and that's, so that's my hand, it gives the children an opportunity to laugh their little heads off and say, and I'll always hear one little one in the background going, oh my God, you're such a terrible drawer. And it gives me an opportunity to ask them who likes drawing, who doesn't like drawing, what it is, and we get a chance to talk about it, which is really beautiful. But then when I'm looking at it, I'll say, right, what can you see? And we talk about the line meets the line, means the shape, honor something, and the gestalt. And this becomes like a cloud in the sky. When you're lying on your back and you're looking at the sky and you see the clouds and you see, elephants dancing with ice creams, and then it changes, and then you see sunsets and the clouds create things. Our minds are amazing. And they fill in those extra lines and that extra shade and that extra depth and create the gestalt. So we look at this and straight away I can see a little character. So then I get the children to actually finish off the drawing. So draw in what it is that they can actually see. Can you see that I've just put a little eye on there? Can you see that little man starting to appear? And then we might do that. And then I might actually talk about, I don't know, what is he carrying? Oh, like a croissant, a large croissant. So he's got his arm up like that and his other arm like that. And there's his hand, because I'm not drawing very much. So there is a little man who's carrying a very large croissant. That little person, or that man, did not exist a minute ago. And that gives us an opportunity to actually create a character. And a character is one of the fundamentals that we need in a story, which is useful for creation. But before I go too far with stories, would you like to have a little go of that? Okay. Now, so you hold your hand up and away from your face, but the piece of paper is so turn your head away. If you feel like looking, it'll make you, like, you'll feel, especially if you're not a confident drawer. So Sarah will be doing this, without even being told, but in the green shirt, you've got to try this, because it makes you feel a bit blurky in the tummy, because it's something that's so new. And that in itself is a really extraordinary thing to, again, talk to children about, or from a writer's perspective, anxiety. This is a hint of anxiety, and it's really, really useful because it makes you, sit up and pay attention. So I'll give you a quiet minute just to have a go of that. Sarah, that's awesome. Okay. Oh, this is beautiful. I love that. I can see dove's wings in that one. These are beautiful. I love it. How funny. So with the drawings that you have in front of you, and I mean, we're doing this so quickly, but we would wait a little bit longer. It is really lovely now to fill in the lines. Like I can't see anyone's names. Oh, Shireen, yours, that to me, that was the beginning of a beautiful bird that could be gracing the skies. Yes, and heading somewhere. And whether Sarah, yours turns into a puppet or a character. And Rekha, like I couldn't quite see yours. No, I still can't quite see it. I think the cameras are a bit funny. I love that one. This is to S. Levine. I think I've got a thing in my head. I just see birds in nearly all of them.
Emma. Yeah, I can see a bird.
You can see a bird.
See a bird there.
So it is really lovely. It is really lovely to finish those drawings. Now, when I first saw this in action, that is gorgeous. That's like a little, if you were in Australia, that's a little lamb with a tiara. That's really beautiful. Najita, thank you. That's gorgeous. Already I can see these characters. So what's so magical about that is that of the 5 fundamentals in a story, which is the character, the setting, the problem, the style, and the plot. And we're going to just talk a little bit about each of them. But the characters, straight away, you've actually created a character that takes it outside of you. It's something that no one has seen before. And that's the joy of the role of the author, is that we get to explore the character, we get to see the settings, we get to understand the problems, all through the eyes of the author, through what the author sees. Is that, oh, Sarah, that is a supreme athlete. They're wonderful. So what the children now then do, and you can do that and really play with it, and that we then have an opportunity to talk about color and what color is an emotion. We actually put them in a setting because we say nothing floating around. And then we name it, and straight away this little character starts to have a life of its own. And what we actually do is then make an assessment, and it's not trying to be judgmental, but looking at your character, say when we're looking at Najita's little lamb, one thing that might make that little lamb stand out with all of its classmates is that its ears might be twice the size of all of the others. So then the little lamb would be subjected to some kind of teasing. How can she unravel that? At what point would those big ears be useful to solve the problem? Okay. And Alex, when I start talking about the plots, this will completely make sense. But we look at the characteristics of the person. So my guy has, he's got a really, really big nose. And, maybe everyone gives him a really hard time. Maybe he lives in the land of little noses and really struggles with that external attribute. Maybe it's an internal attribute that he has, that he actually stammers when he's talking, but he's passionate about making croissants. So he might need to get to somewhere to where he's listened to. But we get a chance to put all of these complex ideas together really quickly. Okay, so the character, that completely makes sense. You're character driven, the setting or where the story is located. And I'm guessing that most of you or all of you would have seen a number of Shakespeare productions, for example. So Shakespeare, why that's a really good, useful when we're talking about settings, is that we've seen Romeo and Juliet, and it's set in ancient Greece or it's set in modern times, and you watch how the setting influences how the characters interact. But it is really important that the characters have a problem. And when I'm reading lots of stories that are written by adults, and sometimes children as well, that one of their greatest challenges is that they present a diary of what happened in a day and there's no problem. And this kind of brings me to what happens with the brain when we're telling stories. So we actually have here it is on this screen here. We actually have a chemical response when we tell stories. And there's a number of chemicals that we release. There's a number of chemicals that we release. Okay, so I've just got it on here, sorry. So we have the dopamine. The dopamine response is pleasure. So when you're sitting there with a little person right beside you, or you're sitting at a writers' festival and you're listening to someone, it actually does bring you physical joy. And we know it's physical joy because the dopamine is actually released in the brain and the receptors go off and they can see that. And the same as, I'm not a fan of horror movies, but the same, the dopamine, it's actually, you know, like it sets you up to move as well if you're fearful and things like that. We get cortisol, and cortisol is a response to stress. So as a story, you've all heard the idea of the story arc. So the story builds in momentum and then it finishes at the end. That actually brings on a really mild level of stress. And so we actually release a little bit of cortisol, but that actually keeps our focus on the storyteller, which is really fantastic. Then the chemical, which is, you actually get endorphins, which is a response to the stress. So that is a really feel-good one. But the main one, which is really wonderful for children's picture book writers particularly to know, is the oxytocin. And oxytocin is the hormone that actually is behind the increased enhancing your feelings of trust and generosity and empathy. Okay, so you put all of that together. If you've got a problem that you want to solve collectively in a village, it makes sense that it's a story, because if we think of how our civilizations have evolved all around the world, they all started with an oral delivery of our stories, and it was fundamental to our survival. But it made us actually work together as one. And that is the empathy building. So in a time like now, when we are so separated, one of the really powerful things we can be sharing around the world at the moment is stories. And we know that stories create empathy. So there's a lot of magic in that for me. Okay, how are you all going? Still okay? Yeah? Okay, all right. Sorry. It is my favorite topic, so I probably should have warned you that, you know, this I might get a bit carried away with all of this. If you do have any, I can't say I don't have the chats. Oh no, I've got the chat set up now. So Sarah, yes, I'll be able to see it as well if anyone has any questions. Okay, so we have a brain that is hardwired to respond to stories. We have a means of delivering them orally or now in books, which is really wonderful. We now know that the brain creates oxytocin, which means empathy. And you then have children in the palm of your hand. So I've got a little bit of a megalomaniac in me that it is quite exciting to be able to hear a pin drop in a room when you're reading to 400 children. You know, it really, children do stop and it captures their imagination. So it's an incredible vehicle to deliver information. And those chemicals are all they are all needed for a sense of safety. And when our children are safe, they actually learn and they're incredibly receptive. So, you know, oh boy, what a powerful tool we've now got in our hands here. Okay, so we've got characters. Characters can come from anywhere, settings can come from, and it can be created and can be as fantastical as they like. Can I just show me, how many of you have read or know the Harry Potter books? A few of you, yeah. So Harry Potter books, the reason I say that as an example is it's the most successful book that's ever been written, in that it's sold over 500 million copies. And what I really appreciate about the books is that it weaves the plots that we're going to talk about. It weaves them all together in a fantastical setting that is not so far removed from our own experience. So even though there are fantastical characters, we've all had a teacher who we've loathed. We've all had a teacher or a mentor that has inspired us. We've all broken our hearts, you know, trying to keep a good friendship together. We've really begrudged the relationships we have with our family and etc. So the settings can be, they're all from your creation. And the big thing that we have to have is a problem, and a problem takes us so that we can take the hero to solve a problem so that he or she is actually better at the other end of the experience. So that feeling that you have when when a friend presents you a manuscript of a novel and it's not quite finished yet, and the character hasn't actually developed or evolved or whatever, and you feel like you've just wasted your time. It's because we really want to be able to walk in someone's shoes. Remember that we've got the oxytocin, so we're already empathetic. If they're not going anywhere or doing anything, we get really frustrated with it. Okay, then the fourth element is the style, which is the prose, whether it rhymes, whether there's any rhythm, the melody of the language. And for those of you who may speak Farsi, you know, you've got the most beautiful language in the world for telling stories because it's so melodic. But the style actually is a result of our own education and with whom we wish to communicate. Okay, and that's where editors can come in and do it. Okay, so we've got characters, setting, problem, a must, and the problems can be internal or external. So because of us or because of others, and then the style. And that moves us on to the plots. And this is what I really wanted to share with you today, because I now work with children at speed, I've had to create, and I'm going to share this document. I'll share it. How do I share it? I might be able to put it into the chat room, actually.
You can send it to Sarah, and maybe Sarah can share it with us.
Okay.
Or you can share screen is also possible, Emma.
Yeah, okay. As soon as I do that, though, I get a little bit lost. Oh, no, I see I've just gone straight to my Dropbox and I've already gotten lost. So hang on,
I'm like that. Don't worry.
Sorry.
I can send it on. Yeah. You send it to me by email.
Yeah, and now it's a book that I'm writing. It's a how-to book, and it's very much in draft form, and like it's from 2018, and I'm still editing it, and I've just had a change of heart in a lot of the descriptions that I've put. But what I have loved is getting very hot now, because I'm working with the children in conceivably very large groups. So for Akila's necklace, I worked with all of the year 4 children at this school, which was 125 children in each workshop. So I need a formula to actually work, a formula which actually helps me pre-describe what a children's picture book looks like, that ticks all of those boxes that we were talking about, you know, like having a hero, having a journey that he can go on. He answers the call, he sets out to have a go. At first it doesn't work, and tries again, always in 3. And we feel deeply satisfied as humans when things happen in 3. And then miraculously something happens and he escapes, he wins, he gets home, he whatever. So that's effectively the rhythm of stories for all time, which is really like it just blows my mind that that's actually a thing. There was a British guy who was then an MP, who Sarah might know of, is called Christopher Booker, who for 30 years read and was singularly fascinated about why we tell stories. So aside from the brain science, you know, what it was about the oral delivery of everything from where our food came from to genealogy to how the seasons work to the stories of our ancestors, and we could always remember it. And there's lots of other researchers doing really epic things about song lines when they talk about Australian First Nations people, to things like Stonehenge being memory aids, etc. But that's another workshop, another day. But the plots, he distilled every story that he read into 7 plots. And the plots were, or are, overcoming the monster, voyage and return, the quest, rags to riches, rebirth, and then comedy and tragedy, or tragedy and comedy. So his thinking was that there are the 5 steps for every story. Every story on that story arc, it's about getting that constriction point so that your cortisol builds up, so that you release the people so that they're satisfied at the end, the miraculous escape. So he believed that those 5 phases were in every story. And these can be distilled right down to a children's picture book, that each turn of the page is one of those parts of it. So when I say overcoming the monster, it's a really useful story for small children because, you know, we want them to navigate their physical environment really, for them to be really safe. So, you know, hot water or cars or stranger danger, you know, that's why it's a really useful storyline for that. We don't want our children exploring with abandon. We do want them to know about that things are physically wrong, because we don't have much, there's never much time if a child is going to get themselves into physical danger. They've got to extract very quickly. The stories have been told, and if we go right back to the oldest story that has ever been discovered, which is in cuneiform on clay tablets that was found in the Sumerian desert, called the story of Gilgamesh. That the story actually is remarkably similar to Dracula and James Bond movies today. Okay. So that in itself is absolutely fascinating, but it's also the same story, which is Little Red Riding Hood, Hansel and Gretel, Jack and the Beanstalk. So typically we meet the main character, turn a page. So for all of these, you know, for children's picture books, it's turn one whole page. Introduce where he lives, and then we introduce the monster and therefore what type of threat it is. So it might be insecurity, it might be I don't fit in, you know, it might be that self-doubt is a really lovely one for children. But the monster shows up and shows its strength, and the main character sets off to deal with the monster. He's already had the call, has the first confrontation and has initial success, and then has a second confrontation. The monster is back and angry. It's tough, but it looks as though the monster is dealt with, but there's a third confrontation. This is getting absolutely horrible beyond comprehension. And then just as it looks as though the monster is going to win, the story has entered a nightmare phase, a miraculous escape. Everyone celebrates, the heroes succeed, and the main character returns back to life. Okay, so if you think about Jack and the Beanstalk, you know, he'd made it all, he had to get all the way to the bottom of the beanstalk, but there was an axe that was there. There was, you know, there was a something that was there. The story of David and Goliath is that, you know, the slingshot just hits the Achilles heel, or the center of his eye, whichever. Little Red Riding Hood, she just manages to escape in time. It is that constriction, but there's 2 really key fundamentals that are really important for children, why they need to have the story, aside from the dangers, is that they are capable. They have it within them to succeed if they only try. And not only try once, but they need to try and try and try again. So there's a second moral, if you like, to every story, which is don't give up. Because if you give up, that's a character flaw, which is a tragedy, or the monster wins because you've given up. So the character fails. And so it's understanding that the call to action. And the other day I watched this crazy video. It was a news story, and a car had plowed into a shop, and there were 2 people that were just walking past it. And they both turned to the car, and one person ran in to the shop to see what had happened, and the other person ran away from the shop. Now, the person who's going to mentally be probably better to be able to process what has happened is the person that took action, because it all happens in our frontal lobe. Whereas the person that walked away, it actually gets locked down into our animal brain, and we actually, until we can learn to articulate it and express it, then they're the ones who then they know that that's the indicators for PTSD and issues later. So that's, I mean, that's getting way too complicated, but it was really interesting to actually watch the hero, you know, like someone answering the call. That answering the call is what I do see at the end of any process of working with the children. I see their self-efficacy increase, and self-efficacy is different to self-esteem. It's their belief that they can do. So for those of you who are teachers, or if you've got small children around you, children with high self-efficacy, you can find them. They're the ones that when you say, would anyone like to, and their little hands have shot up in the classroom, and you haven't even said what you want them to do yet, but they just know deep within their core that they can. And it's different to self-esteem, as I said. It's a high self-efficacy. So the hero has the highest self-efficacy of anyone else in the village. So that's a really nice side story. Okay, so overcoming the monster. Does anyone have any questions about overcoming the monster? I'm not really giving you much room, am I? Yes?
Yeah. I have a comment.
Yes.
What about the stories that leave you wanting more, that don't quite come full circle? Do they have a role in for children? They always have to end nicely.
For children's picture books, yes. Even if they're, so Harry Potter's, you know, with the themes that weave through it, but each year is a single year at school. So the children are living that cycle of birthday to Christmas to birthday, or whatever the festivals or celebrations that are significant to them, but birthday to birthday. And you see that from small children. You know, how old are you? 3, but I'm nearly 4. You know, 4, but I'm 4.5. You know, that's really significant for them. And then once they start in the education system, it's really marked and, you know, bookended really severely. If you're saying there's still more to come, you can only offer that or say that if you've already written the second book that is going to answer it at some point. So a series, yes, there can be questions that can be pursued in the series, but a children's picture book or a story should always finish with the learning that they've had, because otherwise it's going to be a never-ending nightmare too. I mean, you don't want to keep fighting the monster. That's a form of, oh my goodness, no. So the children's picture books, the ones that are really deeply satisfying, are actually the ones that come right back and reference the first moment where they were called. So if they're meet little Josie, she lives in a swamp. Well, she will go back to the swamp, but better for the experience. So they really are circular. And if you think about the actual reading of a children's picture book as well, we usually want the little blighters to go to sleep. So we don't want them, you know, most people read stories at night, right? I don't know why. I was always better in the morning, but and at night I'd be reading to mine, and, you know, I'd be asleep and, you know, have a little finger drilling up my nose to get me up. But if you then have a child sitting there asking you questions, that is not going to sell another copy, is it? You're not going to recommend it. So, you know, they're the really nice ones that end off, and then you close the book and you say good night. So I'm not sure what came first. I'm suggesting that the story was convincing and then the children's picture book. But if we move along, because
I have a question, if
oh,
I
yes,
may.
sorry.
Hi. This is basically, I don't know whether it is in keeping with the section of your delivery at this point, Emma. I'm just asking on the different genres of reading. I mean, you have the audiobooks, the video, the print, right? And how do you mitigate? Like if it's one book, how would you mitigate the different media? That's something I want to leave with you. If it is fitting in this stage, yes, or else do it at a later stage. Thank you.
Okay, I think I'll come back to it. I think if that's okay with you.
No problem. Thank you.
So I will remember it, because I don't want to negate the importance of that question. But hopefully at the end, the story is a story irrespective of the medium. And that's probably where I'm coming from. But yes, I know we'll come back to that one.
Thank you.
So let's just move on to because I really would love to cover all of the plots for you, just so that you can actually see them in action. And if you ever had to set yourself a writing challenge, is to choose the one character with the one setting and the one problem, and actually take them through the different plots and see how they respond in those different, with the different levels of support and things like that. Mind you, I love that I'm asking you to do that. I've been trying to do this since 2018 when I thought of this idea, and I haven't done it yet. So no homework for you, but just a thought for you. So the Voyage and Return is a really awesome plot line, which to me, it is actually, it's really fabulous when you're thinking about children who are leaving home to go to school for the first time. So if they're introduced to the story before they go, they know that going to school and then coming home again, that there might be experiences that their parents won't get to see, but you've got to show them that they can do it. The characters will get back. I think it's really useful for that preschool age for that reason. So the hero travels out of their familiar world. So they hear a call. They have a sense that they just need to explore. The world is completely cut off, though. This is really important. If they can keep one foot in one camp and one in another, that's actually indicative of a child that is having an each way bet and they're not really challenging themselves. So it's completely cut off from the first, and everything seems abnormal. So this, this is why I say to me, it sounds like school. You're leaving the safety and security of your home, and you know where your dolls are and your toys are, and everything's really lovely, and where on earth are you going? The strangeness at first is exhilarating, and it's, there's wonderment and a sense of exploration because you're ticking those boxes. The hero has decided to explore. But then very slowly and very subtly, a shadow, a threat, a darkness starts to intrude in the story, and the hero starts to feel trapped in that space. Usually then, in a thrilling escape, the hero is released from the world and they come back safely to where they began. Have they learnt anything from their experience? Are they fundamentally changed? The story in itself is the reason for the story, which is we can handle things when they pop up. And this, when we're talking about, if you wanted to teach children resilience, having them understand the voyage and return is resilience. It's coping with things that are unexpected. So if I said to you the examples of it, The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, Arthur, Alice in Wonderland, Goldilocks and the Three Bears, I'm picking all the Disney ones, I do apologize. Peter Rabbit, Gone with the Wind, Wizard of Oz, are any of those familiar to you? So it's into that world, and little boys love, thank you, little boys love writing about this. They like the quest more, which we'll talk about next, but the idea of, oogling through a portal and, slipping into another world and being so far away from the grown-ups is deeply exhilarating. But we know what it's like to actually go to a cocktail party when your girlfriend has said she can't go to you. And at first you're really proud of yourself. And then after a minute, you start realizing that you can't remember anyone's names and you can't remember where you got there. And then you're looking at your clock and it's getting really late and it's not much fun. And really you wish your friend was there, and then you just want to go home. So we do understand what that experience is like ourselves. And, it might be a job that we, are not, at first you start this job and it's really exciting until you realize that the shadow is that the routine doesn't ever change. And, how can you get back to your world? That every time we do something like that, we do actually learn more about ourselves and more about our fundamental ability to get through. So again, if the children's picture book, each page, meet the hero's world, get set to fall into the other world. So for Alice, she dozes off and goes to sleep. For the little girl in The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, she pushes through the back of the cupboard. For Goldilocks and the Three Bears, she steps into the bear's house. So it's that transition. For Dorothy and Wizard of Oz, the cyclone whisks her off. So whatever the tool is for transition, And it might be as simple as hitting your head and having a dreamlike sequence to then come back out. But it is two different worlds. At first, it's interesting, then it's really different, and then it's frustrating, and then it's awful, and then it might seem as though you're stuck there. And you've got to, again, it's that try, and try again before a miraculous escape. So you can see, even in this different storyline, we're still back to the heroes answering the call. They're increasing their self-efficacy because they've tried, failed, and yet they succeed. So that means that we have the fortitude within to actually do that. So that's that makes it really interesting. And it's really similar. So that's overcoming the monster, voyage and return. Now we've got the quest, and this is particularly little boys like the quest, because you've got to solve a couple of mysteries along the way. And what's really nice about this is that you usually have 3 sidekicks. And the really nice thing about 3 sidekicks, and you can with voyage and return too, but the sidekicks are really, really fabulous, because the sidekicks, the 3, make one hero. So if we go back to The Wizard of Oz, the 3 characters make a Dorothy, if that makes sense. And you use them to highlight something, but you don't want someone to have all the skills and attributes, otherwise they would be the hero. So this is not a lesson in choosing lesser friends. I'm just saying. I guess you still have your friends, and but we all know that our friends are useful for something. Some are really good cooks, some are amazing organizers, some people are great at logistics, so you choose those characters that help you get from A to B. The quest, which is the hero's call, is an external one versus the self-challenge, and they hear of a priceless gold. And so to me, the quest is, it's a bit like that, that need to find, the need to win at sport, the need to learn the instrument, the grand finals coming up, the final exams are coming up. It's that period of time where things start to become measurable at school, and they already know that, and so it's still applicable at the really early age. They know there are school assemblies and sports carnivals days and things like that. So the hero sets out, and it has to be a hazardous journey. If he's just given the trophy, then what's the point? We all know what that's like. The harder we work from something, the deeper our own self-respect is, because not only the delayed gratification, but also the experience. So it's really useful when you're talking about long-term goal setting with kids, but there is distractions. So we meet the friends, and someone might have the brain, someone might have the brawn, someone might have the heart. They have the call, then they meet a monster. So you choose the monster, pick, and one of the friends, but the hero does the action. Okay, they survive, they keep going. Then it's temptation, and that's really good, because that idea of meeting monsters. Our children meet children who bring out their shadow side all the time. And so they've got to learn to identify what it is that they don't like about other people as well. So that monster within. Anyway, the temptation, again, another one of your companions has the skill to suggest that, but the hero does it. So temptation. And temptation is really, that's children in a shopping centre as they go past, and certainly in Australia at every shopping centre, the sweets and the treats and the toys at the checkout in every shop are actually at pram level. I don't know what possessed them, because a little hand goes out and comes back in and has something, but they can't do that at school. They've got to resist the temptation to take from taking someone's pencils or whatever. Then they keep going, and then they have the deadly opposites, or the journey to the underworld. It's the should I go left or right? It's the classic fork in the road, and that's incredibly empowering for children to see that when you make a decision. Now, I know that there are books that actually you know, you make up your own story, and if you go left, the story goes that way, and if you go right, it goes. But what it is about making a choice. When we have two choices, we have to choose one, and we have to trust our gut instinct. And we may as well learn that from a very early age. Are you hungry? Yes, I am. Would you like jam or peanut butter on your sandwich? You know, that's also why you don't give children, you know, are you hungry? Useless question. They're always hungry or always not hungry, you know, but would they like a sandwich? Don't even ask them that. Do you want jam or peanut butter? Just two choices. And that's their capacity. And that's all that the challenge needs to be. Then they arrive in the land, and at first it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing, but it has seemed a little bit easy thus far. So then there's the final ordeal, which is the epic. And if any of you like I'm a little bit obsessed about Raiders of the Lost Ark. Have you seen that movie at all? So Raiders of the Lost Ark is an English scientist who goes into Egypt to try and find the treasure, gets there, and he has it in his hand, and then all of a sudden the whole temple collapses. And not only does the temple collapse, but a ball rolls along, and then swords come out, and you know, like there's a whole system collapse, and he nearly undergoes in that 5 minutes the same amount of pressure and stress that he did for the whole movie in the line up to that. And when you're actually watching that, it's that, you know, moment. And by then you've got so much, you know, cortisol going on in your head, and your endorphins are going, and you started sweating, and it's that absolute constriction point. And miraculously, you go home. Yes.
Emma, can I interrupt?
Yes.
Do you know if these plot lines are applicable across all cultures?
No, I don't. No, and I'm very conscious that I'm choosing some very movies and things like that, you know, the Europe, the Disney, the American ones. In saying that, the Aboriginal stories, that as I understand them, actually have the same moral coding in the background of it. So whether the plots fit as simply as they do, and given that the Battle of Gilgamesh does or did and does fit the same plot line, I suspect it does, but I don't actually genuinely know that answer to that. But I'm guessing it a yes.
Yeah, Emma, when you talk about this, it reminds me of Joseph Campbell and his book, The Hero Has 1,000 Faces.
Yes,
It's the same, this thing, right? And
Yeah,
I just wanted to tell you that the place where Gilgamesh goes after Enkidu dies to find eternal peace is Bahrain.
Oh, how that's even, yay! There's my link.
Absolutely.
I'm so glad I actually started with that, going,
Yeah,
the most basic one out of all of them. That's really lovely. Thank you. I do genuinely suspect, Sarah, that the answer is yes, because it is so deeply entrenched in our DNA. The style, I think, would be the greatest distinguishing features between cultures, of, you know, which pronoun you would use, what the settings, how important the setting was, what the quest objects were. There seems to be a preoccupation in Western civilization, I don't use the word civilization, Western cultures with eternal life, but I suspect that that's a human condition as well. So I'll just keep going with children's picture books, and if anyone gets the answer to that, then great. So plots, quests. Okay, so we've overcoming the monster, voyage and return, the quest, and definitely the hero has 1,000 faces. You know, we can see that in play here already, and thousands of faces over thousands of generations, yet it's the same stories. Rags to Riches is a really lovely story. To me, it is so I don't know what the word is, emblematic. No, that's not the right word. But to me, it's a story of adolescence. You know, it's our bodies change. everything goes horribly awry and we emerge at the other end, which is probably, I do suspect that that's why Disney chooses it a lot. I suspect that any transition where you need to talk about a person's position in their life and then the aspiration for more, and whether that's because of your position is determined by your culture or it's determined by your physicality. Yes. So it is basically, it's a story of an ordinary, insignificant person is dismissed by all, suddenly steps into the center stage and is revealed to be quite exceptional. So at first we meet a wretched character who has a wretched home and those who make it unbearable. It's very similar to Overcoming the Monster, because those who make it unbearable are the monsters to overcome. But it's stepping outside from those people. Like we can't, it's nearly like it's the lesson that even though this is where you find yourself, you have to find from within your ability to change your circumstances. So, you know, you can't say this is my lot in life. This is and actually illustrative of the fact that you can actually promote change and seek change. So you go out into the world, you have initial success, not really, the central crisis and all those involved in the central crisis. There's a huge impact and then a possible solution. It all looks too good to be true until something happens dramatically in the story. You return to the wretchedness to be saved by someone, and then it's the independence. So it's the first time that someone externally holds out their hand to support you. So it's often saved by the wisdom of an elderly man, stereotypically either an elderly man or a very young little girl. And I'm not sure why the little girl or the older man, other than possibly that they're symbols universally accepted as the least threatening characters, possibly. I don't actually know the answer to that. But they do have the transition is made. It's very, it's fulfilling. The end is celebrated, and whether it's celebrated in a sense of occasion. And it can be applied to very small children. The other list I've got here is the Ugly Duckling, which is a story about a little duck that is hanging out, and everything's horribly wrong, and he exists in a world of beautiful swans, only to give it time to emerge to be that himself. So, and it's the same story as Superman. Superman is the character within who doesn't fully accept that he has the skills and attributes to actually change the world, and there's an irony, changes the world, one crime at a time. So it's the big stories of transition. Okay, so what's it? We've done Overcoming the Monster, Voyage and Return, The Quest, Rags to Riches. Okay, just one more in depth, and this is rebirth. And to me, rebirth is really the domain of the adolescent as they're leaving school, even though it's still in children's picture books. It's when you make really poor choices. And this is a really, really wonderful story to write to. And I read a manuscript the other day, and someone has written from the perspective of the bully. And the bully goes through a process of rebirth. And I read 50 manuscripts for this story competition, and it absolutely has stayed in my head because it was a unique perspective. It was a children's book. It was so beautifully handled and very gently handled, because children are not fundamental. They're not fundamentally flawed, but they do have a shadow side, and different, they have different peers, and it will bring out the worst in them, so it's that moment when you understand that. So it's when the little one, like, you kind of got your goggles on and you're just not seeing the world clearly. And again, this is where the redeemer, the older person or their other half or a young child comes into it. But they manage to realize their error before it is too late. And that's actually the key. You know, there is time for that. And the redemption story is told everywhere. And so we meet the hero, we meet their world, they fall under the shadow and everything's going okay. And they're kind of making excuses. You know, this is fun. I can handle this. And then something really big seems to happen. And then the hero is shifted in that direction. You know, they were going in that direction. A big event happens and then they shift in this direction. And others respond, but you know, they're not enjoying it, but they just can't seem to how they're going to get out of it. And then someone comes along and offers that hand of advice, and they have the sense from within to actually accept it and then change their personality, and miraculously they return as a better person. So it's not, it is used in, again, in the Disney stories, Sleeping Beauty, The Beauty and the Beast, Christmas Carol, The Secret Garden. That's just a few on my list there. It's the transition after self-deception. So that's the little one who's got a little sibling, and you know that they've pinched them and woken up the baby, and you're saying the shadow that they fall under is jealousy, and that they've pinched the baby, and you know that they've pinched the baby, and you say to them, did you pinch the baby? And they say, no, I didn't pinch the baby, but he knows or she knows and I know and everyone knows that they pinched the baby. And then you have a chance to explain to them that that's not very nice, and then they realize. So it can be that subtle a learning process, and that's just an example of what could work in a children's picture book. Now, when we get to tragedy and comedy, so this is at the tail end of it. Tragedy is not told in children's picture books. Tragedy is not, this is where culture really does come into it. Tragedy is not sadness. In every hero's story, there is sadness and there is happiness, because without happiness, there's not sadness, and without sadness, there's not happiness. That's not tragedy and comedy. That's just sadness and happiness. Tragedy is when the flaw of the character prevents them learning from the experience. So they don't overcome the monster. They don't return home. They don't get the treasures in the quest. The rags to riches to rags. It's that return back to it. And what it is, instead of the miraculous escape, the fundamental flaw gets the better of us. Now, it's really usefully introduced into children's literature as the evil witch, the side character, and the evil witch, or that dark force to the side, is their introduction to a flawed character. And I believe that is in lots of cultures. Whereas if we're talking about what is sad and what is happy, different things in different environments mean different things. So there's no, we can be empathetic of each other's stories when we learn about it, but that's why it's not sadness. So does that make sense with the tragedy?
Yes, I think so. I think Shireen has got a question for you. Shireen, have you got a question? Yeah, can you ask it now? Yeah. You're on silent. You're muted, Shireen.
Sorry. This is on Winnie the Pooh, because he's my love. I love him a lot. So have you analyzed him in your storytelling?
Who, sorry?
Winnie the Pooh.
Oh, Winnie is constantly, he is rags to riches every day. He overcomes the monster because he overcomes that self-doubt. Eeyore, as the protagonist, when he is telling the stories of being so pessimistic, but he is resilient beyond belief. So each of those characters, they need each of them, and it's like an ongoing quest. And when he gets his head stuck in the honey pot, but it realizes that was himself who got him into it, he had to get out of it, and just all of those little elements. To me, each of the single stories within the story can actually follow these plot lines, which is successful. Like Harry Potter, it's actually multiple plot lines woven in together, which is why I believe that a classic like that exists, because you have those plot lines, and everyone responds to a different plot line, like, and at different times we like it. So for those people who love horror movies, for example, you know, overcoming the monster is sets them, you know, their teeth on edge. So if you can actually weave that in, not so much in Winnie the Pooh with overcoming the monster, but the self-doubt is his single quest, isn't it? Like overcoming the monster is a quest, but that's his constantly is overcoming that monster. And I think this is a really nice way to have these plots to actually come back and understand what it is about the stories that you do genuinely love, which is really nice. And so I haven't analysed it, but I do fully appreciate what it is that is so tender and so lovely about them. And my first dress up that I ever remember doing, we have in Australia for Children's Book Week, there's always a dress up parade and you go as your character. And I know my mother forgot once, and I ended up going as Christopher Robins, because the only thing we had in the cupboard and had time for was a yellow rain hat and a yellow raincoat and gumboots. And she slapped my copy of Winnie the Pooh in my hand and sent me on the bus, and that was it. And I was devastated and thrilled at the same time, because it was my favorite book at the time. So can I just come back just to finish very quickly on comedy? Comedy compared to the other 6 plot lines, which are very sophisticated, for tens of thousands of years have been part of of cultural storytelling. Comedy is a relative newcomer, and it was actually really Shakespeare, and those who study literature would tell me who preceded Shakespeare, but Shakespeare really, really, really brought it together brilliantly. And comedy in this definition, as I said, not the laughter or the sadness or whatever, it's when the hero and the heroine destined to be together, dark force, but all of a sudden everyone's in a tangle and everyone's pretending to be someone else, and it's purely entertainment, and really came into its fore once we had cultures that had agriculture, that we had settlements, that we had time to sit around and be entertained at night around the fire. So it's the stories that just hold our attention and let us go for no other reason than the exhilaration of the being held to and letting go. So it's a less rigid structure. It can absurdly solve a lot of problems, but it is always miraculously solved at the end. So it's not tragedy and comedy per se in that pure form, and not usually the domain of children's picture books, albeit that they have little hints of it on the sides. So those complications.
Emma?
Yes? Yes.
Picture books, do they always have to have words in? Because I've just found an author that does entirely pictures, and the child, I would presume, tells their own story from the picture. The one is about a kid with a flashlight at nighttime, and very, very clever. I don't know whether the plots do the same thing, because the kids can make up their own plots.
They do, because they get so used to consuming the stories, and it's a bit like what came first, the chicken or the egg, the story or the plot, or the DNA response to the plot. But they're actually called quiet books, and there is a whole movement around the world creating quiet books, and there's authors in countries in nearly every country around the world, and there are exhibitions about the quiet books. And the Australian guy, Gregory Roberts, who unfortunately has passed away, wrote a really beautiful book, The Boy, the Bear and the Bard, about a little boy who lost his circus bear in the time of Shakespeare. So the bard, Shakespeare, appears, and he's actually, in the round and searching for this bear. But children can follow it, and they can follow the plot, and it promotes the internal dialogue. Mm-hmm. So it's that comfort with your inner voice, and they're never going to articulate how they read the stories, but I think that they're suited to children at a certain time. No, they're very special. They're very special. So that's the 7 plots, and I'm very conscious that you know, there goes 75 minutes of your life that you can't get back now that you've been listening to me so far. I wanted to come to Shireen's question about the different formats and how that actually then comes into play. So very similar to a pencil. So I've got that pencil. So the pigment in this pencil, I can't see a color name on it, but let's just call it emerald green, or no, let's call it, what's a good green color, Sarah? Vermilion? No. A good green color.
Jade.
Jade. Okay. So we've got a jade pencil there. No, that's probably a really bad example. I don't know. We'll run with it. So the pigment that actually makes, where's my camera? The pigment that makes up the color is compressed and bound together in that pencil. Now, if I had a tube of paint that was exactly the same color and it was a watercolor paint, it has a different binding medium. So it has a different output, if you like. When they say oil paints, it's the binding medium is oil. If they say acrylics, it is acrylic that binds it. If it's pastels, it's a waxy kind of material. But the pigment in each of those products, fundament is exactly the same. Okay, and in its raw form, and if you ever get a chance to see pigment, it is the finest of fine powders, and it used to be sourced from natural products around the world. So the purples that were used in royal robes and vestures for religious people of religious office. The purple used to come from a crustacean that was found at the bottom of only this, if I say the Aegean Sea, I'm not that far off it, but you know, like one place in the world. The yellow ochre in Australia is from rocks that are ground in certain parts of the country. Okay, so in a very similar manner to the pigment, we have those fundamentals of the story. It's just the medium in which it's presented that actually changes how it's perceived. So that plot line is exactly the same in an ad on a commercial on television when we want the answer to something. So that would really very quickly follow a quest in that 30 seconds. In a children's picture book, each of those phases neatly fits each page, because you assume that each time the page changes and the scene changes, that the characters transition from A to B. In the chapter book, it's just long form and there's more explanation about the setting because you don't have the pictures. So if a picture tells 1,000 words, you have to add 1,000 words for each of those pages. So all of a sudden you get to 30,000, 60,000 words, which is the same as a children's picture book. And even the auditory would be the same. So I believe that the plots actually apply irrespective of the medium that is used for the storytelling. Does that answer your question, Shireen?
Pardon, it takes time to navigate the screen. I was thinking of how it is perceived by the listener or the reader, because different mediums are activated, isn't it? There's a visual medium in a book, auditory in the audio. So that was my thing, you know, how do you get the same, would you call it the response or perception, through the audio medium and the audio visual medium and the visual medium? So there are 3 mediums we're talking of.
And I think that that's because they do trigger different parts of your brain, that the story, if you want to get it across, I think that's where the value of multiple experiences comes in, of sharing multiple. And I can only speak from personally as opposed to with the children, because we don't do the auditory books for the children. We don't translate it. I read the story out aloud. That's how we test the product. And we test it without the words, and it's got to stand up without, the children have to sit with their eyes closed. And if they can't see a common character, you know, we get a little bit lost when we're building the illustrations. So we test it that way, but for me, I know that personally that I need different things at different times. You know, if I'm really tired, I love listening to oral books. I feel, you know, like I love listening to the audio books, and I feel as though I'm really relaxing. So I'm not really answering your question, because I think that consuming across the spectrum is really useful. But we do test them in different phases with the children by reading the stories aloud. And one of the ways that we actually really test it is if I was the writer and Delaney was the listener and Shireen, you were the reader, I would actually give you both a copy of my manuscript, and I'd get Delaney to read and Shireen, you to listen, and I'd actually watch you both. And if Delaney grimaced or, you know, like pulled a face as she was reading, I would circle that on the manuscript and say that needs tightening up. And I'd also be watching you. And if you were sitting forward and your eyes were opening and you were really engaged, I don't need to ask you if the story is good or not. But if you're, getting it like a little bit over it, it's absolutely, you can see people get a bit tappy, and it's even more amazing when you do it with a longer manuscript. So it's a great way of testing it, because if you can hear it, then it will always be successful in the written form, because then you have your own inner voice doing it. There we go. I did answer it.
I do the same. I read my work out loud, and if I stumble over it or it doesn't sound right, I know it's not going to work. Yeah. I tell students to do the same thing. You pick up your silly mistakes by reading it out loud.
Yeah,
because it also slows your brain down, and it makes you read actually what is there. Delaney has a question.
Yes.
Yes. Hi, Emma. Thank you so much for a very interesting presentation. My question is that as children grow older and become adolescents, etc., the need for pictures in the story, how important is it? Does it detract from their interest in actually reading written scripts? And does it, because experience has shown me, I mean, growing up, comics and picture books like comics as we pass age 8, 9, 10 was sort of looked down upon by my parents. But I noticed that when my children were in high school, they even had comic type picture books of Shakespeare stories, Shakespeare literature in their textbooks in school. So how, in the development of the child, how important is it to sort of ease away from pictures in the stories?
See, I think that it should be actually embraced. I think rather than easing away and have us just to be relying on the written word, instead of having that visual reference behind it. Like, I love graphic novels, which is like a grown-up. Now they're actually really, really popular at the moment, which is really fascinating. It's probably the fastest growing segment of the market for adolescents books is the graphic novel, because it's a mature version of the comic, as you were saying, Delaney, for that age group. I think that pushing to just words is actually taking away something that actually makes a story richer and gives us breathing time. So even if I see books that have got the little tiny drawing at the beginning of a chapter, or the first letter is actually in a script or whatever, I find myself that it actually slows down my reading, and I read more deeply versus skimming over. The more wordy it is, and especially if I'm a bit tired or a bit distracted, I personally just I don't see the point in it. There's no one handing out prizes for the number of words you can read. I believe it enhances the reading experience, and it's like a beautiful cover. We're so quick to ditch the images, but yet the investment in cover art is absolutely mind-blowing. And that's actually what attracts us to move around the shop. And there are actually formats for covers as well. You know, we don't realize it, but we can pick a romance out versus a crime versus a literary novel just based on the cover design. So it just gives you an indication of how much we still rely on the visual to actually give us the information.
Thank you. And on another note, the picture books for children, when it comes to tragedies and loss and bereavement and say illness, how popular are those? Because it's also a way of the child learning of what is happening around them.
Mm. So the books that really do it really, really beautifully they actually fit in the either the quest for relief. So you know, to lose a pet, but to get a new puppy in a household, for example, can really, really, really fit the quest. And if a child is really internalizing that sadness and that distress, it actually comes under overcoming the monster. And it is about showing them that yes, so and I'm very cautious that I use sad versus using the word tragedy, even though people use the word tragedy to describe circumstances that are very sad, only because I talk about it in the plot line. So talking about things like there's huge amounts of books that are talking about the environment, about loss of parents, about depression, anxiety, and really big issues that children absolutely do face. A huge one in Australia at the moment is consent. So it's about learning about, you know, what you're responsible and what you're allowed to be responsible for, if you like, with your own body. And that's a really big concept, but it can be shown very sensitively with the children's picture book. And I think children's picture books, that's when they really are incredibly powerful. When they the bigger the concept, the more capable I believe a children's picture book is. And Delaney, just because it ties so beautifully to your question before, I think it's because of the illustration, because of the pictures. And it just means that because we all process things that go wrong. So, I mean, I could be very tough about something, but someone else, you know, Sarah might be, you know, just a mess in the corner with it. Actually, Sarah, you might be really tough about something and I might be a mess in the corner with it. So sorry. And we would deal with it in very, very different ways. We're dealing with it internally and when you're heading out. But if you want to, as the author and the illustrator, if you want to show other people what it feels like, and children's picture books start the conversation. So I'm just going to get a book. Just hang on, because it's really, 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 really beautiful.
Talking amongst yourselves, everybody.
Sorry, no. It's just in my stash. So this is probably this is my favorite book about. This is the elephant. Okay, now that's it. We can see the enormity of the elephant's neck. This is the elephant. It's based on the quip, you know, the elephant in the room. Olivia's father has a sadness so big that she imagines it as an enormous elephant following him around. Every day Olive sees the elephant and every day she wishes for it to go. And the illustrations, this is my favorite one in here, sorry. Only because it's so beautiful, so beautiful. You know, this is everything went black. Can you see that? You know, so that's only lines to actually say it, but compared to the rest of the story. But the kicker in the end of it is really, really, really beautiful. She realizes that she too she doesn't have an elephant, but she has a little dog that follows her around mentally, like she has a little bit of sadness. So by actually showing that she embraces the dog she embraces the sadness, if you like, and then understands where it's from, and that it's not her fault. And that's what she sees depression as being that big. So, you know, that when if you're talking about the enormity of something, you know, describing it, an emotion like an elephant, discharges it, like hands over the responsibility, if you like, to something else. So and it's acceptance behavior therapy or something like that. There's a psychology behind it. By giving it a different name, you can actually then talk about it. And if we think about books, actually, instead of being the end game, for some children they just need the book and just to process it internally. But for other children, it'll be the conversation starter. And if the images, and I won't try and get another book, but that's where color really comes in for a children's picture book. So you can actually, you know, use the words, you know, show me what color this feels like. And if they're, you know, I feel like this today, you know, that's kind of like, that's a funny place to be, you know, like, does something make you angry today? You know, that all of those kind of things can give you a really wonderful opportunity to teach children how to articulate from within as well. I think I got a bit excited by your question and I forgot what your question is, sorry.
Emma, I'm acutely aware that it's now midnight where you are.
No, I'm awake.
She's awake now, absolutely. She's not going to sleep for a week, I think.
No, keep using me. If you're still there, I'm okay.
Okay. Does everybody want to carry on? Questions, things? We all want to carry on? Hands up. Do you want to carry on? Okay, we want to carry on. Delaney, he's turning off because it's picking up a bit of feedback. Yeah. So
I have a question, please.
We have another question to read. Go ahead.
Can I ask, or may I ask?
Yeah.
Thanks. It's about you know, you are bringing so much of psychology into the discussion. Has it to be learned by an author, or is it an inherent thing that an author gets it into their thinking?
I think because I've been trying, because I get to do things like this, it just forces my hand to read a few extra articles. It was like reading about the science of the brain to understand how the chemicals work. You know, that kind of thing really interests me. The psychology absolutely fascinates me. And I think that's, you know, kind of goes back to what Sarah was asking, you know, is this across all cultures? I think this is the link, you know, stories are the link between all of the cultures because our psychology is the same. And what we respond to is the same. We, like humans, respond to objects of beauty. And we all understand that, the intrinsic value of something really, really beautiful. And I really do think that the psychology, I mean, if I'm commenting on it now, it's just me picking it up, either talking to psychologists, listening to, there's a really amazing girl in Australia who lives in Western Australia, which is on the other side of the country. And I haven't met her yet, but she's a speech pathologist. And she analyzes children's picture books from the plots, which to then understand what her clients actually need to learn and where they're coming from it. So she actually finds that, she says, you know, tell me something that's going right at school, what's not going right at school, you know, and if they're having a difficult time with a classmate, for example, and they're feeling a little bit bullied, she'll pick out those stories, and that helps because they respond to it so quickly that then they respond to the instruction for the speech. You know, I mean, she puts it, that's another layer of complication on it again. But no, I'm just picking it up, you know, watching children, learning about it, and various children, albeit different ethnicities. I know all Australian, I've only worked with Australian children, but I've worked with them in all of the different school settings now. So from private schools, you know, which children from very privileged backgrounds to children who fail the national testing, and they all respond in the same way. So it's, you know, it's that sense of universality there too.
So to clarify my question, it's that particular orientation was something that you wanted to do it because you had a personal interest in it. It doesn't necessarily mean that an author has to go into those aspects to understand the craft of writing.
No, sorry. Yes, and that's what I was going to say. And sorry, was that the amazing thing about our brains and how we understand our genealogy and epigenetics. So we understand that what the stories of our forefathers and mothers actually does impact intergenerationally. That's actually why we tell stories, and that is how we hand it on. So the beautiful thing about writing is that if you've been read to and you read yourself, you are as equipped as the next person to become a writer, because you know stories. And that's when you sit with really little children, and within 2 seconds you'll know if you've got a good story or not. They know a good story instinctively, and it ticks all of those boxes that I was describing. You don't need to study it, and your prose will be the craft that you will get better at. So it's the practice of writing, which is also self-editing, which is also sharing your work, but really the biggest thing you can do is actually consume. So, reading hundreds and hundreds of children's picture books, you very quickly get a feel for what is universal, fully appreciating that a book that I like, someone else may absolutely loathe, Nalika has just put a comment on here about the book without pictures. So this is the opposite, Delaney, of what you are saying, because this is a book, and it is absolutely insane. It is only words, and it forces the reader to actually tap into their inner performer. And Nalika, I'm sure that you would actually agree, because you do say it gives the reader time to be creative and read the words differently every time. The only way you can get away with reading that book is to actually is really ham it up and be silly with it and enjoy the sounds that come out of it. And it's just an incredibly joyful one. So thank you for sharing that, because Novak.
Excuse me. I don't know whether we're totally interrupting the rest of what you wanted to say, but
no, I'm yours now. So
okay,
whatever you can suck out of my brain is yours.
Right. Is it a generational thing? Okay, because this is Lorna Doone, right? And it's an issue which is, oh my God, it's so ancient. I just got it off my mum's bookshelf. Let's see, it was probably the first. It doesn't even give you the date. Okay, right. And it has a few pictures in, which I know that if a child today saw those, they'd go, what? Right? Like, that would not attract a child of today to read this book or even to have it read to them. There are, really, come on. So, and my mother kept all of her books. she was a voracious reader, and she was a public speaker, and she won medals for narrating and whatever. She kept them all, thinking that her children would like to read them. But she rapidly realized that we didn't want to read them because it didn't look like the books of today.
No,
when we were children. Now I look at the books and go, wow, look at this. It's all pictures. All right, it's completely different presentation. Just
Sarah, you're absolutely spot on. This is why books that then become classics, and so that's why they're even more amazing. So I used to read Enid Blyton, which Enid Blyton books have got a little illustration at the front of them. Yeah. I just wanted to be George on the island with the crazy professor father and the hopeless mother who always seemed to lie down and let them have amazing adventures. And I kept all of mine, which were my aunt's and my mother's books, and tried to read them to my children, and they're so not appropriate on any level. It's the last thing I want my children to be doing is roaming around the countryside, with the cook having given them a basket of food and sustenance to get into a lot of trouble. Oh my God, no, not even close to being appropriate. But when you read something like my favorite book is Where the Wild Things Are, and it was written 50 years ago, and it is as beautiful today as I would imagine it 50 years ago. It's so beautifully received by children. The same with The Very Hungry Caterpillar, because that's a nature story. And so when something, and we never know that a book is going to be a classic until it's retrospective, right? So I've heard someone say the other day that Gone with the Wind, which was an incredible book and movie in the United States in the, if I say the 50s, 60s, am I far off?
Yeah.
50s.
Yeah, that it wouldn't be published today, that it's absolute rubbish. And there's a whole movement out there that think that the Brontes are absolutely hilarious, that have no substantive literary legs to stand on at all. So, you know, that critiquing over generations, I don't think you could prepare for it. I think you just would have to do the best you could do at the time. And it is endlessly fascinating. You know, to be a student of the history of literature would be really, really interesting.
Okay, any more questions from anybody?
It is so quiet. Oh, hello.
Oh, Nilika, hi. Can you put your, you need to put your microphone on. Yeah.
And I'm going to take a photo, Nelly, because I need a photo of all of us. Smile, everyone. Thank you. Sorry. Hello.
Sorry, I was hiding myself because I was not, I was under the weather. I just had my COVID jab in the morning and was like, not myself, but thought I have to face this. So here I am. So nice to hear everyone and so glad I'm here. Thank you, Teruni, for inviting me. I just wanted to share another experience. I have a little granddaughter of 11 months. When she was about, 1 year and 11 months, sorry. She actually is in for reading stories and all that. And her favorite is Sherry Lenny's The Great Kapok Tree. So when we were talking about nature and books about nature, I just wanted to mention you. Have you ever read this book, This Great Kapok Tree?
No.
Has anyone read?
No.
Oh, you just have to find it. It has the most beautiful illustrations, and it's an Australian author. Sherry Lenny?
No.
Doesn't sound like. I have to find you the book and I'll share it with you. It's really beautiful. And this little girl sits on her grandpa's lap and reads this with him so intently. She's just very young and she hasn't seen much of the nature because of COVID and all that, because she had to be indoors most of her life. However, this book actually just attracts her whole self. And this book is really special because each and every animal talks to a man who tries to destroy the nature, the tree, and says how important the tree is for everyone, for the monkeys, the tiger, the birds, the leopard, you name it. They all come to his ear and say, whispering how important it is. So I just wanted to share and just tell you about another experience I have myself. When I was working for Overseas School of Colombo in Sri Lanka back then, I happened to go with the children to visit an area where there was, what do you call, Kuba? Those were the you know, I'm sorry, I lost the word. Place where the sea meet, the rivers meet the sea.
Estuary.
An
estuary.
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 Yeah.
Anyway, so this area made me write a little book about how people, animal, and the nature meet, and how one person thinks about earning from these trees, the mangroves. Yes, that's the word, Sharan. Mangroves. It's all about mangroves. And see how I lost that word. So I wrote this story and I presented it to the children. And it has really become children's love. But since then, I've left Sri Lanka and I have not been able to sort of really work with it. So I was thinking Emma could help me one day to see whether I can publish this in Australia if I ever get to.
Don't you love it? I when I send the plots, it'll be a really useful tool for you to edit, to work on your manuscript. I don't publish adults' work. And the reason that I don't is that to be a traditional publisher, that involves actually working with an author, paying them for the book, and being so confident about your choice of manuscript that you can sell the book in the current market. You've got to really be on top of what trends are in the market and be in that fully engaged in that selling space to be a publisher. And I'm just not very good in that retail space. It's not my favorite space to be in. So the reason I love working with the children is years ago, I used to volunteer for this organization called the Pajama Foundation. And it's set up so that you volunteer to read with foster children. And the reason behind that was that the foster children who are in care have their brains through neglect have atrophied to 3/4 the size of their peers. So they're really in a state of needing a lot of extra support. So you volunteer to read. I used to take the latest and greatest books to this little girl that I used to read to. And her favorite book ended up being one that I bought for 50 cents in a supermarket checkout stand one day that had no literary merit at all. It was what they call a slice of life book. It was about a little giraffe who went through his morning routine, went to school, and then nighttime routine, and then went to bed. That was it. And she would make me read it again and again and again and again. Now, I can only guess, because she was only little, that what she was craving for was routine, because she felt really safe within that routine. And she felt really safe within the pages of that book as I was reading her that story. I can only guess that. But anything with any literary fiction that really challenged her to go out there, those books terrified her. And so, that was my first great insight. Now, I would have rejected that book outright if I was a traditional publisher, because I just, there's nothing about it that I liked at all. And yet here was this little girl getting an incredible amount out of it, which was really beautiful. And then Nalika, why I then published the children's books, is I say to the children in the process, they all have to make a submission, and they submit a request to me as their publisher to publish their book. And of course, I don't say no to any of them, because they've worked so hard and they've actually done it. But we don't test this commercially. So we only print, 10 books if they're doing it individually, or like Akila's necklace, we've printed 1,000 of those, but we then distribute it free with teachers' notes. So I'm working in a very different space to the traditional conventional publishing model. But I promise you, down in Melbourne, you've got the Wheeler Centre, and the most extraordinary educators, people down there, who will happily be able to guide you towards the publication process.
Thank you. Still for all, I would love to share that with you.
One last question.
Yes, okay, and then we must call it a day because
All right.
there's another meeting coming afterwards that 3 of us are involved.
Yes, yes.
Oh,
And my
lovely.
I wanted to say hello. There's my mum. You can just about see.
Hello.
She just came in like going, how long is this going to go on for? Okay.
No, I just want to know if it's possible to buy these books with the storyteller's notes, like you said, the teacher's notes. Is it available? Because I have a grandson and I struggle every Sunday to make it interesting for him.
Where is he based?
New York.
Well, I can send you like a PDF version of Akila's necklace and the teacher's notes, and you
That'd be
might be able to do
lovely.
it. Yeah, you might be able to do a
Lovely.
screen. Yeah, a screen share with it because we distribute it
Yeah.
for free. It would be
Thank you
crazy.
so much.
So
Yeah,
I'll do that.
She's an author in Australia. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the lovely Reka in Bahrain.
Thank you.
That's Anamika, is my lovely friend, who I've been messaging as well. This is Usha, and we're all part of another event in about an hour's time. so
Half an hour.
half an hour. Okay, so we really do need to wrap up. So I guess what is left for me to say is thank you so much for talking all the way through the night in Australia. It's been really, really fascinating, and we look forward to getting the little manuscript you want to send on to us. Usha is waving at me. Did you have a question or anything? Oh, that was it. No. And we would love to be in touch with you moving forward. Anybody can join the International Read to Me Day page on Facebook. Emma is always looking for people to read. You do a little video, you read out loud. You do have to get permission from the publisher, but Emma does all that. And you can see some crazy videos that I've done really bad. Okay, so
that's where we're really analyzing it now to see if it has indeed got any value with all of the feedback that we had, Sarah. So
yeah,
fingers crossed that it still fits the model of what we're doing. But I'm so grateful for this opportunity to be involved. This is my favorite thing to do, is to share everything that's in my head with you. And I just love that we're connecting, around the world in this time when, honestly, Australia couldn't be further away, as I know Nalika would be, realizing it. We really are a long way away from everything. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's been lovely, and round of applause. Thank you very much. And
Thank you.
be well, everybody. Take care and don't get sick. Yeah. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Emma. Thank you.
Thank you very
Bye-bye.
much. Have a lovely evening and good morning or good night to you, but
Yeah,
thank you very
so
much.
much.
Thank you, Emma, so much. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.